How do major police services use forensic 3D digital twin technology to document crime scenes with precision? How did Urbanimmersive adopt its digital twin platform to meet law enforcement and courtroom grade requirements? Stay tuned. Hi all, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Wednesday, January 7th, 2026. You're watching WGAN-TV live at 5, a podcast for digital twin creators shaping the future of real estate today. We have an awesome show for you. Urbanimmersive and the Sûreté du Québec Police Service for forensic 3D digital twin crime scene documentation. Our subject matter expert is Urbanimmersive Executive Vice President François-Hugues Liberge, and joining us is WGAN-TV podcast co-host Tom Sparks. Francois, thanks for being back on the show.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me again, Ben.
And Tom, good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me as your Ed McMahon. I appreciate it.
That sounds great to me. Francois, before we jump into today's topic to do a deep dive, tell us about Urbanimmersive.
Urbanimmersive, as you know, we have been around for many years, doing many different things, and among them, our core product is our 3D technology, which is a fully immersive technology with floor plans and UI Meet, which is like a Zoom conference. So that's our basic product. We're based in Montreal, serving customers all around the globe, mainly in North America, but also in Europe, some in Asia and Australia also. So that's our 2 cents, in the nutshell. That's what we do.
In terms of the scale and scope of Urbanimmersive, number of customers.
Customers, we have we have mostly real estate photographers. That's our main core business, but also diversifying into different areas. But I'd say we have around 1,500 customers using our platforms on a daily basis.
All right, awesome. And kind of the big picture of Sûreté du Québec Police Services?
Yeah, this is like one of the main police service in Canada. They cover the whole territory of Quebec. So as you know, it's a big province. So they have a lot of territories to cover. They cover over 1,000 municipalities. They have over 8,600 employees, and of those, over 6,000 are officers. To give you maybe a scale to compare, the FBI has 10,000 agents. New York State Police has 4,700 officers. LAPD has 8,000 officers. So it's a pretty big police department, especially because they're covering everything. They cover all the smaller cities in Quebec, plus highways and everything that's border related. All the major, like the big crimes and all that, they're all involved in everything. So it's really they're pretty much everywhere. So
awesome. And so what is Sûreté du Québec doing with Urbanimmersive?
They were looking for a solution that would allow them to have a better documentation and visual content of every crime scene that they have to investigate. They had a solution right now that was not really user friendly. It was complicated. It was the equipment was massive and it was hard to operate, and like the footprint on scene was big and all that. So that's why they were looking for something else. And even though they were taking pictures, they still had to do a lot of manual drawing and manual work with it. So and because the equipment was so expensive, so massive, they only had 2 to cover the whole province. So they saw it was not fair to other regions of the province that could not have the same service. They cannot be able to offer the same service in more rural areas that they do in major cities. So they were looking for something else, something that would be quicker, something that was reliable, and that was easy to operate and flexible, like something that was user friendly. So they were looking for something else. So they came across. They spoke to different companies. They looked for them. The main object, like the main thing, everything had to be offline. They had to be able to do everything by themselves because, like, for sure, we don't want to see dead bodies, and those images are the images that you don't want to be around on the web. So they were looking for a solution that was like fully independent and that they can install on a laptop or an intranet, something that they said was run locally. They looked at Matterport. They liked the feel and touch of Matterport. They liked the possibilities, the end result of the Matterport. They really liked it. But again, Matterport is always cloud-based, so that was like a turn off for them.
Oh, and I
And
think of urban immersive, I think of cloud-based as well.
yes, and that's what everybody assumes. But at base, Urban Immersive 15 years ago, we did a nuclear plant, we did the subways, tunnels, and things like that were offline. So that's why when they heard about that and talked to them a few things like that, so that's why they were really interested in what we were able to offer to them. So what they did, like they had to go because their process for procurement processes, so they had to go through an RFP. So they went with a pretty detailed RFP with all the requirements, and we applied to it. We were actually the only company to answer the RFP, which was I won't say surprising because we knew we had something a bit special, but confirmed that okay, we're on the right path. We're on the path to something that's really unique, and
Well, I'm not surprised because I would imagine, and help me out here, that urban immersive is the only solution that provides a non-cloud processing alternative with an immersive 3D walkthrough experience. I've been doing this for 10 plus years. I don't recall that there's any other platform that is both offline and a immersive 3D walkthrough experience.
and you're actually right about that. Like usually what we see offline are like there's two different things. Either they have like just like their regular 360, and then you have to jump to another one so you don't have the immersive experience, or maybe not police related, but what we saw offline too, like especially for the army, what they do is like they do with CGI, so they go with the CAD plans and they recreate a big 3D engine, a 3D environment that runs with 3D engine, which is super hard to navigate through and super hard to handle because it's a massive file. So our solution was something that was really like super simple. Like we're taking just regular 360s and then we're complicit it's getting more and more complex by adding features in it. So we had like I won't say cheap, but now an affordable solution that was able to be scaled easily to the requirements, as opposed to have something bigger trying to downsize it. We were working the other way around, trying to a simple solution that is just getting more complexified, but in a good way. So that
Yeah,
was
I know I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure Tom does as well. But before asking you some more questions, I think it would actually be helpful to see a demo of what a crime scene or even what Sûreté du Québec signed off on. If you
yeah.
could go ahead and maybe share your
Yeah, I'll show you.
screen and
We
show
did an
you.
example for them. It's not a real crime scene because we didn't want to go there,
Yes,
but we
thank
did
you.
a
Yes, we
we-
appreciate that. And I understand that Urban Immersive does not have any access to
exactly.
any of the data. It's not when the tours are processed, they're processed locally on a laptop. They're not processed in the cloud. You don't have Urban Immersive doesn't have access to the data. But for the purpose of being able to
Yeah.
show and tell, you have a actually cloud-based tour to show us. And again,
Yes,
that's only for the purpose of a demo. It's not how the
exactly.
solution is delivered for a police.
But the end result though on their laptop is the same though. Like the end
Okay,
result, the navigation, the tools, everything you see that could be replicated on the laptop. But so
awesome. If you could go ahead and share your
yeah,
your
I
screen,
will
that
do
would be
so.
great. While Francois is doing that, if you want to get in touch with Francois, urbanimmersive.com. You can even go to urbanimmersive.com/contact and fill out a form and get in touch with Francois. We're just starting to see, we see your screen. Thank you. And
Perfect.
maybe if you could make that, if that's not full screen, if you could make it full screen for us. Yep.
So so if you see the three different features we have, like it's like a 3D tour. Every dot that you see is where a 360 was done. Also, there's no limitations on that. You can do more or less depending on the what you want as a result. Sometimes like if you really need to cover that, you just do more. It's a place with a lot of details that you really want to make sure you're covering every angle. You just do more 360s and
Okay.
something like that. So you just want to walk through, then there's no problem. You just walk through like that. The zoom features is also there. It's like I said, it's your 360 where you can go look at everything. So it's like the same, like a fully immersive experience. And we have what we call like hotspots or UI tags with different, so it could be just like this, for example, just like a beauty shot of an evidence that they have. You can have more information if you want, like this about evidence, so they can measurements that can be taken on site or in the 3D tour, but you can actually put more information in it. And also the last feature, like I'll show you here, is like a video, for example. If they have a surveillance video that they really want to put in, they can put that there also. So you
So
have
this looks like what you're showing is actually all the features, all the feature set of Urban Immersive
Yep.
is available to the police department. It's just all created offline, hosted
Exactly.
offline, viewed offline.
Exactly. And you have like
Never goes to the cloud.
never goes to the cloud, never leaves their computer, never leaves their
And then
servers.
I think part of what I'm also seeing is all this annotation. So whether it's if the police department is taking photos or video or measurements or has some other graphic or drawing, all that can be annotated within the urban immersive tour experience.
Exactly. And same thing with the floor plans, that like the mini map, like it's like interactive map. Every gray spot is where 360 was done. And that can be like they can put as many things as they want on the floor plan, so that can have some different information if they want it. You can use that to navigate. So if I click on a dot directly, I'll go directly to that dot. So you don't have to walk through the whole thing to get directly where you want to go. We have also like a Dell House mini map, so that way that allows you to navigate. I know what's if you see there, like in the there's a wall here, but that allows me to see what's on the other side of the wall without having to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can say I can go back to the floor plan, and then if you saw in the house there was something interesting right here. So then we'll
Yeah, so in
say,
fact,
okay,
if you could show us going back to the mini map of how
yep.
you could quickly navigate to the crime scene.
So
I
if I
know
find
that
it
there's some evidence that we're looking at, but there was an actual
exactly. So by I doing that, I just click on here, and that
boom.
brings me here directly.
Okay, and that's a dummy
It's
model
a
for the
dummy,
purpose
exactly.
of your
Yes.
demonstration. Okay.
Yes.
Then there's also some features for measurements and photos in that bottom
Yep.
right corner. Yeah.
Exactly. Here, like this is the like that's a UI meet. If I want to go, I could unlock UI meet. So we could have also like a or a Zoom, but an integrated Zoom that's in the visit. So if, especially for police departments, when they have to talk to DAs or things like that, to have other like inputs about what they saw on a crime scene, so they can invite people to it.
So
So
for
that
clarification, for this demo, that feature is turned off, but the
exactly.
UI Meet 3D, this amazing way to kind of teleport into the tour with others and walk around together
Yep.
as if you're all in the space. So rather than
Exactly.
doing, let's say, a Zoom and showing the tour on a desktop, you can actually be immersed in the experience walking
Yep.
around together. Okay, great. And there were some other features you were going to point out in the bottom right?
Yes. The mini map that's there, we can just like if you want to have more information, a better view, just take it like just turn it off and turn it on again. We have the dollhouse feature to have the whole depiction of the whole scene. Here we have like you can take a screenshot. That's also interesting if they want to have like something. Okay, I really want to show this here, so I'm like that, like, and then take a screenshot of it. So that way, you have the picture right away without having to go back or take if they want just to share a file, just one image, you can do that right away here. Same thing with measurements. I can just take measurements here. And the settings, depending if they want metric, imperial, French, English, or any other language. Those are the
Okay, great. Unless there was something else to show us, if you could take it off of the screen share.
yes.
Just real quick, Francois, do you have any specs on the measurement accuracy or
Depends. Like what we do, it's like we're over 95%, but there's some recipe that needs to be followed. Like the height of the tripod must be 48 inches. What we suggest usually is to put a calibration measure, like just knowing something that we can calibrate with ourselves
Yeah.
with. like a measuring tape. So, okay, so we know like this represents the 12 inches. So then we can calibrate the whole environment based on that. So that allows us to have a better accuracy by doing that.
Yeah, so typically police will put down those kind of measurement cards next to evidence. Are you guys able to use those to kind
Yeah,
of scale the whole tour to that?
exactly. Yeah,
Nice.
that'd be perfect actually. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. Francois, reading through the request for proposal, if I understood the request, it was actually only looking for a solution that did 360 photospheres, as opposed to an immersive 3D experience. Correct me if I'm wrong, and was this just something that blew them away when you were able to take their RFP and go that much further with it?
Yes, exactly. It blew them away. They were really surprised about the all the possibilities that could be done with just like getting regular 360 spheres. They really liked like so the user experience, having being able to go more in details, having a full understanding of the whole of the whole crime scene. Because sometimes like what they do, especially with pictures or when they had their big equipment, what they're doing is they were really focused on where the body was found, for example. And then they were blindsided and a couple of years after in court saying by defense attorney say, yeah, but like, okay, like we found the body in the kitchen, but like the fight started off in the bedroom. So then and they brought new evidence. So then they had to go back, but usually like 2 years after the house was sold, repainted this and that. So it was hard for them to rebuild the whole crime scene with the whole house, for example, in that case. So what they're doing, what they liked about the 360 environment like that is like what we just did in the parking lot. You would go everywhere, we cover every angle, so that way they know that they're not missing anything, or they could be missing something, but at least if it comes back 2 years after, it won't bite them because they'll know, okay, I can go back virtually in it, and it doesn't make sense, or gets another assessment of the whole scene of the whole situation. So they like that possibility to have all that knowing that they'll never miss anything. That was the most important thing for them.
Yeah.
And what kind of camera or cameras are used with Urban Immersive to create these? Um,
The good thing is we're camera agnostic, so we right now we're compatible because they're the most popular ones with the Ricoh and the Insta360. That one was done with the Insta360 because we really like it. They're really aggressive tech-wise. They're really innovating, so that's why we like them.
so
The
today, a police department could use an off-the-shelf camera like a Ricoh Theta
Exactly.
Z1 or Ricoh Theta X or an Insta360 5.
Yeah, X4, X5, RS1. That was like.
Yeah.
But if they had a specific other 360 camera, that would be
We'll
fine.
just make it compatible, yes.
Yeah.
We actually we tested for example, the Leica, the BLK. Um, it could have worked, but again, like it's just an expensive piece of equipment.
Well, overkill.
And yeah, exactly. And what they got of it, like the cloud point and everything, was too big of a file to play with.
Yeah.
And it was not worth it for them. Not in that case. They did not just need something as precise. They really wanted something that gives them visual content. That's what they wanted.
So for Urban Immersive offering the police service, these are off the shelf, under $1,000 360 cameras. I imagine, I think what I'm hearing, the resolution was fine.
Yes.
The ability, I think, to shoot HDR was an important piece of the RFP, and the file size, in contrast to perhaps like a BLK 360,
Yep.
way more manageable. I think also
Exactly.
the RFP called for, and I was surprised on this. It said every 360 needs to be completed within less than 10 minutes. That was part of the spec.
Yes.
I don't even know how I could take 10 minutes to
Use
because it's so quick. I mean,
use a
Tommy,
BLK and you'll take 10 minutes.
if you use like a BLK 360, you'll take 10 minutes. So it sounds like you Urban Immersive way over delivered on what the minimum specifications were from Sûreté du Québec Police Service.
That's what they like because the quickness of the capture, that's what allows them actually to get the whole like the whole area, like a house, for example, not just where it happened, because that way they were able, because you don't want to spend too much time on site then because you contaminate the crime scene. So you have to be like in and out. But with the quickness of our app and our capture process, with that, it's okay. They like I said, they're able to get the whole thing in a reasonable amount of time. So that was for them a big plus also, because like I said, like you said, the quickness of it, being able to not being in the way when
Well, I
people
just
are
imagine
investigating. So
if the crime scene is on a highway, you have
that too, yes. Yep.
tension between getting the evidence quickly and efficiently, but also opening up the road to traffic again.
Yes.
So it seems like urban immersive is way over delivering in terms of the ability to capture. Is there some benchmark that you talk about? You put down the camera on the tripod and you're at, it's a minute. It's like,
Exactly. It's about 10 to 20 seconds to get a 360. The long thing is if you need to hide, that's the thing. It's just like takes more time when you need to hide. But if they don't mind being in the crime in the picture, then it's like it takes 5 seconds and that's it, and then you can
so
move to the
probably
next surface
most of the
safe.
time is actually spent on the police officers' knowledge and experience of what would be the best possible spot to take the 360 for the purpose of telling the story.
Yes. But
Uh,
with our technology, actually, it says like take as many as you want. It's simple. It's like it's not time consuming. So go around, scan the whole thing, make more than you need, so that way you don't regret after. So I should have gotten a spot from that angle, or you just we want this to be a no-brainer for them. Just go there, move the tripod around, and that's it. So
so
that's
I, I have a quick question, kind of just regarding capturing and maybe people being in the scan. Obviously, it's impractical to have nobody in the scan, but do you guys offer? Is there a blur feature? Certainly to maybe blur victims if needed, but also to blur people on site, law enforcement, or cleanup
yes, we
cleanup
have a blur
crew.
feature that could be automated.
Okay.
And that's in crime scenes because I don't think they want the victim to be blurred because
Yeah.
sometimes you need some information.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the police or technician, that people that does a capture, that person can be blurred, no
Okay.
problem.
Nice.
And when you talked about the equipment, about the 360 cameras, the fact that it can be compatible with almost everything, like cameras that are affordable, it takes the focus away from the gear and
Yeah.
more focused on the technology of the thing.
Yeah.
That's what
well,
that's the thing that they liked because the other process that they had, the gear was so expensive, they had to get approval for that. And if it breaks, it was a hassle for them to get that repaired or to get a new one. And also, when I talked about earlier, they had two pieces of equipment that were in Quebec City and Montreal because that's where more crime scenes happen. But for them, it was not as fair to be outside of Montreal and Quebec. So they wanted something that was accessible. So the plan is to have a lot of little kits with a little case with tripod and 360 camera that could be in.
Francois, take us through the kit. I know we don't want to focus so much on gear, but I think it's helpful to understand. Well, the police department asked in the request for proposal related to hardware, software, training, and support. Can you
Yep.
tell us what the deliverable was
Yep.
to Urban Immersive to fulfill the request for proposal?
Yep. The capture equipment was a simple Nanic case with a small tripod from Manfrotto and like Insta360 X4. That was like that.
Okay,
There was
so let's just translate, perhaps for police department that's watching the show for the first time. A Nanook case is a hard case to
yes,
contain the camera and the laptop. The Insta360 4 is a inexpensive 360 camera, less than $1,000. Tom, help me out
but
here. Less
the
than
case was for the like we have like backup cameras, we had like backup lenses, we had like the tripod and the 360 camera that was in the kit. So that way, like it was really capture kits. Like can have that in the police car or patrol and like have fun with it, and everything was there.
Did
Do
it
you have?
contain the tripod as well?
Yeah, the tripod was in the case. Yes.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
Tom?
do you have a sample? Do you have the tripod near you where you could show us the footprint of it or the size of it or
But
maybe the model
if you
number?
go, if it like was Yeah, it was like the Traveler, Manfrotto Traveler, Element Traveler. So that was the small one. So that was like it's a small aluminum tripod,
Okay.
and it fits really well in the case. Like it was so small
So
for me.
literally everything, the urban immersive crime scene kit contains everything. The hard case contains the camera, the
Exactly.
tripod, the backup camera,
Yep.
the laptop. It's all completely,
Yep.
literally a kit.
Yeah. And the laptop, you don't have to bring it on site. You can just do capture, because we provided them with the tablet. Like they had wasn't an iPad, but they had the tablet to be able to, instead of using their phone to do capture, the app was on a tablet. So that way it was a Windows tablet. So that way we were able to access the files and all that on site. So it was better for them to have
And
that.
so excuse me, for clarification, the laptop was the purpose of being able to process the tour.
Exactly. It
And
was
is
the
the laptop
post-production.
carried with
No, it was
the
like
kit?
they can if they want to be able to have that on site, but usually the laptop stays at their office.
Ah, thank you for that
Yeah,
clarification.
yeah.
Um,
But with the tablet, they had an SD card, so everything like the project was on the SD card. So that way, that's the only thing that they have to manage and share was the SD card.
SD card.
I might have
Um,
missed it, but what was the tablet again? Or did you say
It
that?
was a Lenovo tablet, so it was
Okay. Got it.
Again, it's not a proprietary tablet. It's anything that
exactly,
can be off the shelf. I imagine
yes,
that appealed to the police service was the ability to, if they needed a replacement piece of gear, everything's off the shelf. It's not a proprietary
exactly, exactly,
uh, uh,
yes,
camera.
yep,
In fact, I've mentioned the Sûreté du Québec Police Service RFP. For those that would actually want to go see it, it's at wgan.info/police, and all the documents for the request for proposal are public documents, and you can see them there. They are in French, but easy enough to upload it to ChatGPT or other platform to have it
yep.
translated or get the key points out of it.
And you'll be
Uh,
able to say Sûreté du Québec as well as Dan does, so that's great.
Thank you. Thank you, ChatGPT. Um, uh, Tom, were there some questions you were thinking about for Francois?
No, I kind of was asking him as we were going things that were popping up. So I'll let
Okay.
you continue and I'll chime in.
Okay. The there were two key benefits I believe I heard. So the police service, uh, Sûreté du Québec police service, presently using a system. They weren't happy with it. Was expensive. Was hard to use. Required a lot of sophisticated training. So Urban Immersive solves the cost of the equipment, the speed of capture. It adds 3D immersive virtual tour, digital twin experience, even beyond the 360s. Uh, were there other things that were just really compelling for the police service when they looked at the urban immersive solution and went, wow, that's amazing?
The fact that the equipment actually was so affordable for them, it was a nice way to democratize the access to that. I'll say short-term goal is to have like in every region that they're covering at least one kit to be able to cover every crime scene and not only because what they do it was what they were doing before is using equipment only for big crime scenes, not the smaller ones. But smaller ones also important also to cover. So for them, that was the main goal, that the best way for them to accomplish their mission of being everywhere and offer the same service to every citizen in the province of Quebec. That was a nice way for them to be okay. It's a fair trade, but a fair way to go to operate. So that way, so everybody around has the same coverage from the police, from Sûreté du Québec all across the province.
I
So that
just
was
pick
the
up on the word that you use, Francois, democratization. It seems that the democratization of crime scene documentation with the urban immersive crime scene kit is possible because, as you mentioned, the affordability, the off-the-shelf equipment that is used, the minimum training. I know that you all have provided, Urban Immersive has provided training, but it's not a solution that's all that hard to understand how to capture with an RICO Theta X or an Insta360 V5 camera. It's relatively simple.
Yes.
So that meant it wasn't like they were taking $30, $40, $50,000 piece of equipment and can't afford to put that in multiple locations. Now it's this
Exactly.
inexpensive kit that can be replicated easily and not necessarily have to even have a laptop with each of those kits because that data is transferable within the police internal network. Is it might,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah.
And like you said, it had to be foolproof that anybody, because they're not photographers, they're officers, so they needed to some of them have more expertise in that, but still they needed to have something that was like you said, replicable, that was user friendly, that they can put. The goal is to put that in hands of anybody that works at the Sûreté du Québec, so that way they'll be able to, if there's a crime scene, like I said, a car accident, anything that could be, there could be a liability with that helps solve problems and prevent problems, actually prevent cases that where they can be liable for it's, oh, you missed that. And I said the thing that they hate when they work so hard to investigate a crime and to have like to solve a crime is being down the road in court a few years after being blindsided by a new piece of evidence that they never saw because they weren't they were on site, but they focused on just one area, one room. So that for them was frustrating because there's so much work involved in getting the evidence aboard and to comprehend the evidence and comprehend like a full crime scene. So that was for them the main differentiator is like with that, okay, we'll be able to make sure that we treat every crime scene equally and that we don't miss anything. That was the most important thing for them.
Urban Immersive is primarily a residential real estate photographer platform, as I see it. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's mostly for residential real estate photographers. When you first saw this RFP, was there were there things that you went, oh, we can't do that. We can't. No, we can do that. Can you talk a little bit about like Urban Immersive, the platform has not changed. It's just that you've spun off a solution specifically for police services. Can you talk a little bit about what that process might have been like when you read the RFP?
Surprisingly, we didn't have to that much to be able to answer to the RFP. That was the surprising thing is really because we did that in the past, like I said, many years ago, but we kept the same workflow and same mindset that we had before. It's okay. We migrated everything to a new platform, so it was more up to date. That was the only work we had to do, but basically all the features we had, we knew the pathway, the path to get them to work offline. So it was surprisingly easy for us to get there. And we saw it really as like I said, as a main differentiator for us versus other technologies that are out there. I think that's really our there's a place in the sun for everybody, and I think that's our place in the sun in the 3D immersive experience.
So, Tom, you looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I just kind of going backwards a little bit to the police. Do you have any stats on like average training time to get somebody up to speed to be able to do it? I mean,
Yes, and we train them, so it's just so we're used to train photographers,
Yeah.
and we have also some appraisers that are using technology. We
Yeah.
had to train people in Europe, all across North America, trained from virtually, pretty much. So we knew that we had the knowledge and know-how to be able to train them. And we were surprised that the training for the capture was fairly easy. I'd say a few days, just if they really want to be super good, but after half a day of training, they can go on site and try it and be functional. Maybe not experts, but be functional. So that was also something that they really liked, saying, okay, going forward, if they want a kit in every patrol car in Quebec, they know that anybody in the car will be able to operate that.
I want to go back to that RFP because I imagine that the data control, privacy, it seems like you solved at least half the puzzle by not processing in the cloud. Were there other features that you needed to address in terms of the data control, the privacy of the data being able to have it courtroom defensible.
That's why at first that's why in the RFP, we're looking for two laptops because they really want to make sure that everything was controlled and aim small, miss small. So if everything is there, they'll make sure that all the data is controlled. And now they saw that, okay, with an SD card that nobody replicates, they download everything they can erase, nothing's kept on the tablet, everything's on the SD card. They download everything to their laptop, they erase everything else. So they know the data is really secure for that. So now we're working with them to be like the next step will have to be able to put that on their intranet. So to be more accessible. But again, everything leaves a footprint. So they know when the image was taken, if in our processor, if everything has changed, if somebody goes in and modifies the 3D tour, like the 3D tour and by adding another panel, whatever, we'll know exactly, like I said, they'll leave a footprint. We'll know exactly when every modification was done. So for them, that was a secure environment for that. And also the other thing, like when you talk about training, the other catch 22, I say like it was the post-processing that we usually do ourselves.
Mhm.
Part of it is automated, but still have some human involvement. So we've trained them to do that. So that was the other thing that we weren't sure how that would go. And we were surprised that it was, again, after 2 days of training, they were able to be functional and recreate by themselves like any 3D environment that they had to work on.
Is
And then the
oh,
time,
sorry, good.
please, Tom.
No, I was just gonna say, is the training part of the package price with this, or is training kind of an additional thing, or you order X amount of kits, you get free training, or what? Is there a self-training method that they can do?
There's many things exactly. It's not one size fits all. It's really customizable to what they want. They wanted training. They wanted to buy like a bank of hours for training.
Okay.
So we were able to do that. We didn't go through the bank with the training that we did for the capture and the post processing. We didn't even get the half of the training that they purchased because like I say it's a fairly easy
Yeah.
process to do so.
If there are police departments that are watching today's show, uh, can they just reach out to you directly and engage your services? Do they need to do an RFP? Is that up to them? Or maybe just if you could take us through perhaps the RFP process with the timeline, maybe that would just be helpful to signal to larger
Yes.
police departments, and then we'll talk about smaller police departments.
Like as I said, there's no one size fits all. So we can be, I won't say creative, but we can make sure that it fits. Like the price so far has never been an issue. And so there's many ways to look at it. And depending on a fully licensed thing, if they want like more one station, two stations, working stations like laptops, how many cameras they wanted. Um, for Sûreté du Québec, they really wanted for us to be next to them. So that's why they they purchase hours of training and all that. They really want to make sure we're taking them by the hand. Also, assessment of their IT for the integration for the intranet. So that's why there's many things involved that made the RFP a bit higher price wise. But it could have been lower if there were no laptops, for example, if they're a police department that already has like sufficient equipment, or we can just integrate that into their equipment. So again, that makes it more accessible. But again, and depending on the procurement laws that here in Quebec, they're pretty strict. So that's why they had to go through an RFP. But usually we're managed, we can go under under what the minimum requirement for an RFP that's usually
Okay.
doable.
I think what I'm hearing is soup to nuts. If you want soup to nuts, you can have it. If you just need the soup, if you just need the nuts, you can just have it configured to whatever your needs are. And I think the key thing was it's the largest police service in Canada, which probably says something about you've been stress tested by a very large, vetted by a very large police service. Before I move on to asking you about other use cases for this platform, is there anything else to talk about related either specifically to Sûreté du Québec Police Service or police services in general as a category?
But just like for Sûreté du Québec, what we liked about that is because they already had a solution in place, they were familiar with the process. So it was a different solution, but still they were familiar with, okay, we're getting pictures, 360 spheres from a crime scene. So they were, for us, we consider that a good test because they were able to compare us with something else, as opposed to somebody who implements something like that based and going from sketches on a on a piece of paper to a full 3D technology. They cannot, for sure they'll be happy because from where they're starting from, like they'll be happy with the end result. But with them having them and be able to challenge us and to benchmark us with something else, it was a nice sentiment for us at the end. So okay, like they saw, and like you said, it's a big police department. They have access to technologies from all around the world. So when Sûreté du Québec publishes an RFP, people look at it, and so they're really credible. And people, it's okay. Like if they want that, how can we answer it? So that's why we thought it was a good benchmark for us and a good way, like you said, tested and approved. Like that's what we like. They've been using it for a few months now, so almost a year now. So so it's really so far so good. So that's why we're confident to offer that technology and that solution to other police department around the globe.
Awesome.
So,
If
Uh,
you said they've been using it almost a year, roughly a year, do you have any feedback on numbers as far as how many tours they've done?
no, that's like I would have liked to, but they say they're satisfied.
Okay. Okay.
So yes.
Yeah,
Satisfied's a good
and,
word.
and I'm guessing since it takes somewhat of a long time to actually go to court on cases, it's a little bit new to know to ask you questions about. Well, tell us about the courtroom
Yeah.
experience so far.
And it's like insurance or airbags. You're happy to have it, but you don't want to use it too often.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
the same
Okay.
thing.
So I'm going in a moment. I'm going to ask you about residential real estate photographers, our sweet spot for We Get Around Network, WGAN-TV, our podcast. A few things I wanted to mention, and then another topic. First, any police services that are watching today can go to urbanimmersive.com, specifically urbanimmersive.com/contact, fill out the form, and just request information to hear back from Urban Immersive on your unique situation. Second, if you want just an overview of Urban Immersive, we've done a number of WGAN TV podcast episodes. You can go to wgan.info/Urban Immersive on WGAN. And among the most recent shows was a refresh intro to urban immersive services for real estate photographers. While not specifically for crime scene, I think it gives you a good overview of urban immersive, the company, the services, etc. And again, before we talk a little bit about real estate photographers that may be watching our show today, you've designed this offline solution for police departments that is private, secure, addresses data control, privacy issues. Has Urban Immersive thought about what other verticals might be able to take advantage of this outside of police services?
Yes. And like CSI, like this crime scene is like a full-blown offline, everything really like fully independent. But there's some midway solutions that are at the end result is still offline, but the process may be a bit different. And one thing we have done actually with the RCMP here is to really have a midway solution. There's still the end result is still offline. They're doing everything by themselves, but the post processing is done by us. With some of our employee had a background security clearance that so they can watch and work on critical environments. But again, we just do post processing and push everything back to them. So we're not keeping everything on file. So don't have any, like once everything is done, everything's deleted on our side. So
So
that,
if I'm hearing you correctly, there's actually two different secure services.
yes,
One is literally, here's the suitcase, here's the
yeah,
Nanook case that the imagery never gets processed in the cloud. It's only done on the police department's laptop.
yeah,
That's one secure solution, but you have this other solution, which while it is cloud-based, you have team members that have gone through security training, and you have a process and procedure for things that perhaps maybe is less, and I'll use an example, and perhaps it's not the right example, but a school system that wants to have documentation of all their schools and classrooms. They're fine with urban immersive processing it in the cloud. They're fine with a process that has a secure person who's involved in the processing. They're fine with having Urban Immersive agree to delete the content from its servers and provide local hosting for the school system. Would that be perhaps an example?
Yes. And the cloud-based is really, I won't even say cloud-based, is just like the files are transferred over the internet and pushed back over the internet, but but that's it. Like nothing is hosted, so it's really
great. And then I think, Tom, you and I were talking, I think, yesterday, and I think you might have even had some use cases you were thinking about for either one of these solutions that were not specific to police departments.
Yeah, I mean, I was sharing that I got a call from a local fire department fire captain who wanted some insight into the different platforms to be able to do post fire accident reconstruction, I guess. So going in, I'm assuming going into a house that may have been burned out or a business that had been burned out and scanning it and using that as some of the assets to investigate what caused the fire and, need it for court maybe at some point. And so this was several months ago and I shared my thoughts on it. And, it would have been great to know about this, to share this. And so I'm going to go back to her and say, hey, I found something new. Check it out. So there's that. I was thinking kind of related to police, but accidents, traffic accidents, emergency preparedness for schools. So if there's ever like
I think you were also talking about private security firms.
Oh yeah, so in the town over from me where I'm at, the local police department is a little short staffed and they've brought on a private security firm to handle some of the, I guess, more mundane tasks. Mundane, I don't know if that's the right word, but um so yeah, I could see this fitting in nicely where the security guards, have kits in their trunks, and if they're out doing something on behalf of the police, they can just capture it and easily give it to the police, and maybe somebody back at the office can review it and you know kind of use the security as a liaison between what's happening on site and what's happening back at the department.
Yes, and Francois, were there other verticals that Urban Immersive was thinking would be able to leverage
yes.
these two existing secure solutions?
And we already did a few of them for like say power companies, for example. Like they have nuclear plants, they have dams, like anything that's critical that they don't want the environment to be out there, but they need that. They need it for asset management, training purposes, for when they need to plan some works. We did some water treatment plants, the same thing with that. So for them, like they like the fact that we're able to post process everything to them and them like a finished product that could be hosted offline by them on their servers. So that's why, and especially when you talk about photographers, real estate photographers, they all have like big networks, big customers also that say, especially in the commercial ones, say like I have a customer has any industrial building, for example, where there's I won't say company secrets, but like we know about industrial spying and people don't want to share their workflow and their setup. So, but they need that for training purposes. So they would like to have something that's like say again hosted locally. So everything that we offer to them for that, that's perfect for them. That's a really nice. Those are other verticals like say asset management for us is a big thing. And like I say, it covers many different things. Just a hospital, for example, they can use like the online version for the pediatric patients they have, like to say, okay, this is where you'll go, this is the waiting room, this is the operating room, but they still, as again, for to manage the whole building, for like say emergency situations, for contingency plans, for the firefighters to be able to train themselves, they can have those environments offline that can be transferred to the fire department so they can train themselves without having to walk through the whole hospital so they can know before if they have to intervene there, they'll know the area just by training themselves at their station and working through it. So those are things that are the offline aspect of it opens up many, many possibilities. And I see real estate photographers being able to offer that to their network and people that they know in their community, be able to offer that service, which is a bit different than the other guys around. So the offline aspect in those areas is really, really big, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
Francois, for service providers, real estate photographers that are watching the show today, thinking, well, what's in it for me? In fact, let me ask the question a little bit differently. Tom Sparks, owner, managing editor, publisher of the We Get Around Network, his other hat is Sparks Media Group, Scan Your Space, large service provider, lots of clients, including commercial clients. You heard him talk a little bit about fire departments. What is it that you would want to tell Tom as a service provider of what's the opportunity perhaps for Tom or yeah.
To diversify its customer base, because we know residential is cyclical. There's up and downs. There's off seasons and big booms in the springs and in the fall. So those like the opportunity to be able to offer a service that's offline to more industrial or institutional customers that say, can you can offer the full service that will take the scans. I'll come back to you with a USB key with the project on it. So that for me, that's a big selling point for them to be able to have a bigger customer base instead of diversify the revenue where the revenue comes from.
Well,
To be
let's
able
break it
to,
down, if I can, into maybe three categories. And Tom, please step in here. You're the actual service provider that's out there shooting and has many service providers shooting for you. I think of the three categories. The first is let's call it police departments. Uh, uh, Tom is not going to be engaged by the police department to go shoot crime scenes. So what's in it for him to, is this altruistic to be like, oh, I know people who are in law enforcement and I should tell them about this solution?
we can offer like if we talk about like really the commercial side of it, we can offer like a finder's fee to anybody because there'll be license involved and all that. So if it's a photographer that has like connections with that, we can offer them a finder's fee if they bring us a police department. But it's a nice way for them also to be involved because everything happens for a reason. So it's a nice way to open doors and have more contacts and be able to position themselves more as not just a real estate photographer, but like a visual content expert. So
So
that's
that
what
would really go back to the second category of, let's say, businesses that have secure spaces and really, you mentioned nuclear power plant. We've talked about manufacturing facilities. So in the case of a manufacturing solution, it may be, Tom, have you ever run into a manufacturing facility or commercial space where the client said, gee, I'd really like to have a digital twin or virtual tour of my space, but I just can't have it hosted on a cloud solution?
Yeah, yeah, all the time. Nobody wants to pay hosting fees. Um, so yeah, no, I do. I have clients that want to keep things quiet for just confidentiality reasons. They don't want it out there. They don't want it looked at. I've had people say, can we buy a device? Is there a device that we can buy? You can come operate it and just leave it with us. So you don't even see it, take it back home and process it. So yeah, that's definitely a use case. I was gonna say, kind of maybe related to that in a way. Have you been uh, contacted by anybody who wanted more information, almost like a more customizable type platform, where maybe in the case of a water treatment plant or a utility, energy utility, they want some sort of IoT data being displayed on this 3D tour, almost like a dashboard for internal use only.
the
Has
I really like where you're going with that because for me, my vision is to have like an immersive tour being a dashboard. You come
Yeah,
in the morning, you open that, and that talks to every system that they have. So it's a nice way to centralize information. People are getting more and more visual now. So if you have like they have there's softwares out there for managing for anything for sometimes some are like say IoT, sometimes some are direct. You really want to have a on time actual reading, a live reading of a pump, for example, or a video feed that you have, and we have
Yeah.
surveillance cameras. So that's why I think of like the success of a virtual tour is to have it as a dashboard that communicates with everything else that you have, all your backend systems. And just like if there's anything critical that happens, it flashes. You have like a little display. Hey, like there's a red light, click on it, then brings you directly in the room where that situation is happening. So you can manage from far, from far. You don't have to be on site to be able to manage teams on site, especially with the UIMIT solution we have. You can direct people and it's okay, go there, do this, and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had
So
like
I
as
hear you on that, Francois, excuse me, I hear you on that
uh,
use case, and it's very sophisticated, and it's
yep.
an exciting use case. But I really think for the purpose of our photographers, real estate service providers, I want to say the key takeaway that I heard from Tom was I speak to potential clients all the time that have secure locations or are particularly sensitive on hosting fees when digital assets need to be saved for very long periods of time. So I think perhaps, Tom, your ears kind of just perked up. Well, oh, there's now an opportunity, there's now a solution that didn't previously exist that is both a 3D immersive
Sorry.
digital twin experience, and it's either offline or the second scenario that Francois talked about in terms of it's super secure, the data just gets processed and downloaded and boom, we're done. It never ends up being.
And like you said, we talked about something that's like aiming for defense, the dashboard and everything. That's the big home run.
Yeah.
That's the big home run. But
But it can be a lot simpler than that. Just
it can
when
simply be that it's a scanning opportunity
yes.
where that opportunity may have been, oh, it has to be hosted in the cloud. No, that doesn't work for me. Oh, I have secure locations that I have manufacturing facilities, nuclear power plants, mechanical, electrical spaces. I don't possibly want these spaces to be on the internet, even if the tours are set to private. It just frightens me that we may open up to the world an opportunity to walk into our secure factories. And so, Tom, I think that what you're pointing out is like, oh, well, I can do all that scanning now that maybe I couldn't have done before because it's now the only platform that I'm aware of that is 3D immersive digital twin experience and has this security features that Francois has talked
One thing
about.
that we did, it was for a city. Actually, they had a municipal sports complex with soccer fields, indoor soccer fields. They had a pool, indoor pool also, and a skating rink. And they used that actually, they used technology for two things. The first one being for actually an RFP. They needed to do some work, so we scanned the whole thing for them. And they used, okay, like one room where they wanted to do work, so they put the RFP documents that I shared with you for Sûreté du Québec, something similar to that, into the 3D tour. So you were able to get the information, then see it live, like in the 3D tour, to see, okay, that's what they're asking for. And so you were able to take measurements. So they were able to have like a first, I'd say first draft was okay, like you're interested. Okay. Instead of walking through the whole thing with everybody, every contractor that could be interested, they sent that first. So that way they were able to say a first screening, actually to say, okay, like, yeah, I'm interested. So then they went on site. And also they were using that for the lifeguards over the weekends. With the pool, they have some chlorine system sometimes. So, and if it doesn't go well, they were able in the 3D tour actually to have the all the manual instructions to say this is how to shut it down. If anything happens,
Yeah.
go there, do this and that.
Which
So,
actually you led into that. The third category, which I wanted to mention, was government, and that would
yep.
be a use case for government. Uh, uh, uh,
I have,
Francois, before we say bye, Tom, you had some questions that you wanted to ask?
yeah, just for those of us who might be intimidated on walking into our local fire department or police station, um, is there something set up in place currently where not that it's ever a guaranteed, but if you ever were to get a lead at Urban Immersive saying, hey, there's a need for a scan in this area, are you able to feed leads to people who already have equipment?
That's our goal, especially for like the asset management market. That we're dealing with a big company here in Montreal. They have 16,000 locations worldwide. And then we have a pilot project with them right now for their stores here in Montreal. And if it goes well, perfect. But they don't want to buy cameras. They don't want to do all scans. So that's why again, that's like you said, that's the kind of thing that we would like to offer our network of photographers. Say, hey, like there's an opportunity. And the good thing, those are not time sensitive. So, okay, before the end of the year, we need to get all those stores done. So they can be done in the downtime. So we think for photographers, that could be a good opportunity and a nice way to fill the downtimes to be able when there's less real estate, go do convenience stores or pharmacies or restaurants or that's our goal
Yeah,
to go
that's
there.
awesome. I hope that the 15,000 pans out because we get around can certainly help you with help wanted ads in the We Get Around
Exactly.
network forum to help you find service providers in markets that
Yes.
you presently don't have coverage.
Yeah.
Tom, before we say bye, did you have a last question for Francois?
No.
Francois, did you have a last question for Tom? You want to give me one last pitch of why he should be out talking up Urban Immersive for secure 3D immersive tours?
But yeah, about the lead thing you said about fire departments and anybody, if you had anybody you think, okay, there's that fire department or police department, you just give us the information. Like now, we'll do some work and work in partnerships with like a guy like you, Tom, to make sure that we're getting that we win that contract and we work on it together. That's we see ourselves as partners for photographers.
Yeah.
We've always been there for photographers and we see this as a good opportunity for Urban Immersive, but for photographers also out there.
Francois, thanks for being on the show today.
Pleasure again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Tom, thanks for joining in as well.
thanks for having me, Dan.
We've been visiting with our subject matter expert, Urban Immersive Executive Vice President François-Hugues Liberge, and also joining us today, WGAN-TV podcast co-host Tom Sparks, more importantly, the owner, managing editor, and publisher of the We Get Around network. For Tom and Francois, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum, and you've been watching WGAN-TV live at 5.